round of questions, and the first question goes to Arnold Viersen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses today. I really appreciate the work that you do, and it's as I look through the list of all the reports that you've put out, it looks like you're busy people. So thank you for making time to come and address us today. One of the things that we were proud of in our term as government was the Financial Transparency Act, and I was just wondering if you could comment on how that rollout went, and how many, if you did a study on how it was approached by the communities, and what kind of take-up we had with that piece of legislation.
We really didn't do an audit on that piece of legislation or how that was implemented. So really I can't comment on that.
Okay, thank you. We talked a lot already today about the contribution agreements that have been around, and you talked about in BC, specifically the health area there. Is there other layers of government, municipal or provincial, that have similar contribution agreements, and is there other layers of government where the same thing happens, where there isn't a contribution agreement and lack of funding?
Well, if the question is specific sort of to the First Nations file, again, I would say that there's a whole gambit of different types of agreements in place between various levels of government. So sort of trying to categorize them, wouldn't be particularly easy. And we haven't really audited that from the perspective of all of those different types of programs that are out there. What we identified in the British Columbia First Nations Health Authority situation was that it wasn't just long-term stable funding from the federal government to the health authority. It also involved the provincial government and provincial government funding from a long-term basis for the health authority as well. So that was a case where we have seen it. I don't think any of the other audits, did we see it? Okay, so Mr. Martyr can speak to another case.
Well, thank you for that. As the Auditor General mentioned in the opening statement, in order to make movement in a lot of these files, there has to be the will and the coordination among all three players. For example, the policing program, that's a program that's funded 52% by the federal government and 48% by the provinces. So and they have different types of agreements that we talked about. So we saw there that it's very important that these programs are coordinated. When you talk about health services in remote communities, again, that whole delivery and the health services that are being received by the recipients from the First Nations point of view, it's very important that they get the health services from all the players. So coordination is a very important issue that has to be managed by all three parties. The emergency management issue, also there's provincial funding that takes place there until the emergencies is such a magnitude that the feds have to kick in. So in a lot of these programs, the federal government normally has the lead, but from the service delivery point of view, there's all the three players that have to be involved, and the services themselves are actually delivered by many First Nation organizations.
Thank you. You noted that on many First Nations reserves, they lack organizations to support service delivery, such as school boards and health service boards. Did you come across any reasons why those boards don't exist, or is it because of the different structure in government, or is it just not the expertise in the area?
Again, I think it's probably difficult to generalize. And I don't think we were sort of looking to necessarily why do they not exist. I think that what we identified was simply that when there is a gap in having those types of organizations there to make sure that services are delivered, then it's harder to make sure those services are getting to people. So I think it was more just a matter of identifying that in order to make sure that those First Nations members are getting access to those types of services, it's important to have somebody whose job is to make sure that on the ground to make sure that, that those services are actually being delivered to people.
Thanks. We're out of time there. Arnold, thanks.